The Neighbors. Action is the antidote to despair. Joan Baez. (2005). As the relentless noise from the construction work invaded my once peaceful world, it became increasingly difficult for me to concentrate on the administrative tasks for the hotel. With the incessant sound of bulldozers and cement trucks resonating through the house, my nerves were stretched thin. To make my situation worse, the neighbor who owned the dive resort behind us sold it and returned to Germany with his family. In his place, an American investor moved in behind and wasted no time expanding the hotel. The consequence? The noise of construction assaulted me from two different directions simultaneously. The concrete truck by the window where I slept, and the relentless clamor of saws and hammers echoing outside the window where I worked. Generally, I could take the onslaught of noise until 11 in the morning, when I had my first breakdown of the day. Attempting to ease my pain, I went out to talk to the new neighbor. I hoped he would be receptive to my complaints and ease off the saws for a bit, but my emotions were surging uncontrollably. I waited as his boat anchored on the beach and then dropped to my knees in the shallow water, fully clothed. I crawled toward him, tears streaming down my cheeks, a desperate plea escaping my lips. "Please stop the noise. I can't take it anymore," I sobbed. This was probably not the best way to approach the subject with him. He looked embarrassed as he walked past me, unwilling or unable to acknowledge my distress. I was heartbroken by the realization that the tranquility of our once idyllic island paradise had been shattered by the ceaseless clamor of development, encroaching from all sides. I dragged myself back home, clothes soaked from the sea, and stormed into my room. The emotions surged inside me as I tore through my closet, flinging clothes in every direction. In the bathroom, I let out a primal scream, louder than the construction noise outside, before collapsing onto the floor sobbing. I just had a meltdown in front of everybody, and I felt so ashamed. Once I regained control, but still whimpering, I carefully folded each piece of clothing and restored order to the chaos. By the time I finished, the workers had left and my closet looked even neater than before. In the weeks that followed, I struggled with profound sadness as memories of my past emotional breakdowns resurfaced. Each intense outburst gradually filled up my reservoir of shame and guilt and weighed heavier with every passing moment. Finally, the neighbors on the other side of our property sold their hotel. This was the place where Pierre often disappeared to. Initially, I felt relieved that I wouldn't have to constantly track him down there anymore. However, I soon learned that when people invest in a hotel in paradise, they typically aim to turn a profit, which inevitably leads to further construction and development. These neighbors built an illegal bar just a few centimeters from our beachfront rental. Selling the idea of peace and tranquility became more difficult with the bar right next door. I discovered a deceptive tactic in construction and development. You obtain a permit for a simple project, then proceed with whatever you want, waiting to see if your neighbors object. If they complain, you simply pay the fine, and there's seldom an obligation to dismantle or relocate the structure. Faced with a bar encroaching on our tropical hideaway, action was imperative. Pierre used his creative talents to build us a drink cart. I promoted one of the housekeepers to barmaid, and we began to sell fresh fruit cocktails on the beach, cheaper than the neighbors. I started to buy fruit by the truckload. We cut them up and froze them in our large restaurant freezer. We practiced recipes, crystallizing the sugar with lime juice, then added mangoes and rum to make a very tasty mango daiquiri. I drove around the island with our gardener in our beat-up wreck of a car in search of coconuts. We parked outside their homes, and I shouted up to the house from the front fence, "How much to buy the coconuts in your trees?" We added the soft skin of the coconut and the coconut juice to make the best piña coladas on the beach. There were days when the cruise ships docked in town and the line in front of our drink cart went all the way down the beach. I enjoyed watching while the neighbor's bar was empty. "Revenge is sweet, served on ice with mangoes," I declared. Once the drink cart was up and running, Pierre quickly lost interest. His initial enthusiasm faded, and he retreated to his room, spending more and more time alone. In the past, he would distract himself by visiting his friends next door, but after they sold their hotel, there was no one left to pull him out of his funk. His sulking became more frequent, casting a gloomy atmosphere over everything. I couldn't stand it when he was like this. It made being at home feel heavy and tense. Maybe it was more than just a bad mood, something deeper, like depression. But occasionally, when his spirits lifted and he wasn't sulking, Pierre joined us on the beach. Those moments, though rare, were a pleasant surprise and a welcome break from his usual withdrawal. One evening, I stood waist deep in the water with our guests while the kids played on the beach with their friends. I could take a break because their nanny was watching the group. I droned on about the latest destruction on the hill behind West Bay. I noticed Pierre approaching in his bathing shorts, and I realized how nice it was to have him with us on the beach at sunsets. What I didn't realize was that he and the guests had conspired earlier to prank me. Pierre, in one of his playful moods, purposely asked a guest a question he knew would get a rise out of me. In those days, I was always fired up about protecting the environment, and Pierre knew exactly how to push my buttons. "So, what do you do for work?" he asked our guest. "I'm a property developer, and my wife is a real estate agent," the guest replied. A wave of irritation hit me. These were the two professions I blamed most for the environmental damage all around us. Pierre's eyes twinkled in anticipation of my reaction. I thought about all the comments I'd made recently, criticizing the very work this couple did. My mind raced. Had I insulted them without realizing it? "Oh, how nice," I forced out with a stiff smile. "I think the kids need me," I added, making my retreat before I could say anything more. I waded out of the water and onto the beach to join the kids. I hadn't realized it was a joke, but the amused smiles on our guests' faces reassured me they hadn't taken offense by my abrupt departure from the conversation. As the island underwent its transformation, grief settled over me for the loss of its natural resources, the trees, swamps, mangroves, and hillsides, all sacrificed in the name of progress and tourism. I wasn't in the mood for jokes back then. I began waking up with a sharp pain in my jaw, but I ignored the signs from my body and kept fighting the developers around the island and fighting Pierre at home. Pierre had told me that in 10 years we would hate how the development ruined the island. His vision was confusing to me at first, but became clearer as each foreign investor arrived to replace lush landscapes with million-dollar projects, uprooting tropical fruit trees and mangroves in favor of resorts. Running the hotel remained a source of joy, offering the opportunity to welcome guests from around the world and making sure their stay was fulfilling. But in the face of inevitable change, my idealism waned, and Roatan transformed before my eyes. I wrestled with the harsh reality that the fight for preservation was becoming increasingly futile. I saw it as the erosion of the island's essence, while they called it progress.